Are you terrified of asking basic questions in Portuguese? It's so common to simply freeze even when you know the words. Panic simply takes over. So if you've ever felt like a deer in headlights when someone speaks to you in Portugal, this video is for you and it's going to change everything for you. By the end of this video, you will have 10 essential questions that will help you navigate daily life in Portugal with confidence. Plus, I'll show you how to answer them for when they are asked back to you, because that's where most people get stuck. I'm Liz and I have helped hundreds of English speakers just like you go from freezing up in conversations to confidently handling everyday situations in Portuguese. My students call this approach absolute gold because it gets them speaking from day one. Like Patricia, who even though she's only been studying with us for a few weeks, she already worked up the courage to introduce herself at a cafe and was told by the man working there that she speaks wonderful Portuguese. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. Patricia didn't just wait until everything was perfect. She used the few words that she did know, kept it simple, and had a wonderful interaction. That is the power of starting small with Portuguese. So let's get into it and turn the traditional grammar approach on its head, because what nobody tells you about learning Portuguese is that it's not about memorizing hundreds of words or perfect grammar. It's about being able to handle the practical situations you face every day. So think about it. When you first moved to Portugal, what were the first things you needed to do? Order coffee, ask for directions, find the bathroom, right? These everyday interactions are your gateway to feeling confident and integrated into Portuguese life. And this is exactly how I teach my students. From day one, we focus on practical questions and answers, because when you can actually communicate and get a response, it creates what I call a virtuous cycle. You realize you can do this, which gives you more confidence to try, which leads to even better results. So let's jump into these 10 essential questions that will really transform your daily life in Portugal. We will start with the question word onde, meaning where. Now, if you watch my recent video on the closed E sound, you will recognize that that is the E we are using in this word. Onde, onde. Now, be very careful not to say and, okay? People with an American accent will always add that A where we want an O, onde. So the first question you can ask, nice and simple, onde fica a casa de banho? Where is the bathroom? Of course, this is absolutely essential. Now, as a learner, it can be quite confusing to master the word is, because we actually have 3 verbs we can use here. But in this context, when you are describing something that cannot move, like the bathroom, we will either use for is or fica. Portuguese people use both, so don't stress about which one to use. The word we're not going to use though is está, because that one is for the location of something that can move, like your wallet, for example. Onde está a minha carteira? If someone happens to ask you the question of where something is, a couple of simple phrases you could use are é ali, it's over there, while pointing in the right direction. Or if it's nearby, é aqui ao lado, is right here next to us. I do have a whole video on directions, so if you want more on this, then I will link it for you in the description. Next up, the payment method question. Aceita cartão? Aceita cartão? Again, notice that closed A at the beginning of aceita that we were talking about in my last video. This comes from the verb aceitar, meaning to accept. So it's not really a question word one, but still a really helpful thing to learn. This is crucial to also understand about Portuguese culture. It is not a cashless society yet. So many small shops and cafes and family-run businesses do still prefer cash. So I tell my students to carry about 20 euros in cash, especially when visiting smaller towns or traditional establishments. Now, about that word cartão. Notice that nasal sound at the end. It's the tilde accent over the A that is telling you to nasalize that A. So it's not cartão, but cartão. You really need that air coming through your nose. This nasal sound is one of the trickiest for Portuguese speakers, so I have made a whole video on how to master it, and I've also got a free pronunciation guide that covers 7 of the most difficult Portuguese sounds, and you can get them both in the description. The good news is that transport in Lisbon now accepts contactless card payments, which is fantastic for tourists and new residents. But let me share an insider tip. If you do get a Portuguese bank account, then download the MB Way app. It's Portugal's mobile payment system, and many vendors will accept MB Way payments, even if they don't accept contactless cards. So it's very popular with the locals. So the response will usually be, when you ask, aceita cartão, will either be sim, yes, or não, só dinheiro, cash only. Or they might say, temos MB Way, which is that mobile payment system I was telling you about. So question 3 is all about asking for help. Desculpe, podia ajudar-me? This opens the door to getting assistance in any situation, and once again, there is that closed E at the end of desculpe. Now, if somebody asks you for help, you could say, claro, of course, if you can help, or desculpe, não falo português. I'm sorry, I don't speak Portuguese, if you can't help. Question 4, how much does it cost? Quanto custa? So here's our new question word. Quanto means how much. And when we see a QUA in Portuguese, we are actually going to hear that qu sound. This is different to if it's QUE or QUI, where we just maintain a k and you don't hear that U. So look out for that. Also make sure that you make an U sound at the end of quanto, and the S in the middle of custa should be a sh sound. These little pronunciation details are what make you sound authentically Portuguese rather than you're just reading from a textbook. Something else interesting, you might also hear quanto é in more casual situations, which literally means how much is it. There's the it is that we were talking about earlier. Both are perfectly acceptable, but quanto custa is slightly more formal and will work everywhere. Question 5, what is this? O que é isto? This is a fantastic way to build vocabulary because you can just point to something and ask the question, o que é isto? And it will stop you from sounding like a tourist. Now, these first syllables, o que é, can be very tricky, and most English people want to say, okay, é, but it needs to flow more like o que é. We're going to end with that open E sound, é. So when somebody asks you this, you could say, isto é, this is, followed by whatever it is. But if you don't know, a really great answer is, now say, como se diz em português? I don't know the word in Portuguese. Now this leads beautifully into asking question 6, which is, como se diz em português? How do you say it in Portuguese? So, como is our new question word here. In this context, it means how. So again, make sure you're getting a nice U at the end of como, a nice closed E at the end of se, and a nice sh at the end of diz. Now, ang is a difficult word to master because that's another nasal sound. Ang. The trick I always give to pronounce correctly a word that ends in M is to chop off the M and put an NG at the end, like in sing, thing. That's going to give us that nasal sound that we want. Let's practice. Ang, ang. And then your final word, Portuguese. Careful not to put a ch in the middle. We say Portuguese, but they don't. They say Portuguese. So practice that one and it will sound fantastic. Number 7 is the shop assistance question. If you are browsing in a shop or come face to face with a customer service person, they might ask you, em que posso ajudar? How can I help you? So many people panic when they hear this, but don't worry, you're going to have 2 perfect responses ready to go. You could respond with, estou só a ver. This means, I'm just browsing, I'm just looking. That só means just or only, and it's incredibly useful. Or you could say, estou à procura de. I am looking for. So for example, estou à procura de sapatos. I am looking for shoes. Cultural tip, Portuguese shop assistants are generally less pushy than in other countries, so using estou só a ver is perfectly acceptable and they will usually leave you at home to browse in peace. Question 8 is a magical one-word wonder. You can say so much with just one word. The question is posso, which means may I. You can use this when you want to sit down, when you want to try something on, when you want to take something from a shelf, or even when you want to interrupt a conversation politely. It's your polite way of asking permission for almost anything. That's the beautiful thing about posso. It works in so many contexts. Want to try on a shirt? Posso. Want to sit down at a cafe table? Posso? Want to pet someone's dog? Posso? The response will either be claro, of course, força, go ahead, or maybe à vontade, feel free. That's of course unless they say não, não pode. Question 9, asking somebody's name. The informal way of doing this is como te chamas? And the more formal way is como se chama? Now, you'll remember that I said the question word como means how, and that's because this phrase literally means how do you call yourself? So that's why we have the question word how in there. To answer, you would say, for example, chamo-me Liz. That's, of course, how I would answer, but you can have a go with your name as well. Again, be really careful and listen out for that closed E at the end of me. In chamo-me, it's not chamo-me, which is a really common mistake lots of people make. Question 10, where are you from? De onde és? Or the more polite way, de onde é? This is probably the most common question you'll be asked as a foreigner in Portugal. So to answer, you are going to say sou, I am. Then you're going to need to know the gender of your country. Now, this sounds really weird, but bear with me. In Portuguese, we do actually assign genders to countries. So if your country is the Estados Unidos, that is masculine and it's also plural. So that means I have to say sou dos Estados Unidos. This would be different than being from Canada, which is masculine but singular. So for that one, we would say sou do Canadá. But if you were from Romania, for example, guess what? That's feminine. So instead, we would say sou da România. Now here is a bonus tip. If you ever get overwhelmed or don't understand, you can just hit the panic button, smile and say estou a aprender Portuguese. This is your secret weapon so that people know to be patient and helpful because you are just new at learning the language. Remember, if you want a structured approach to mastering not just these questions, but all the fundamentals of Portuguese conversation, then check out my free 60-minute lesson in the description. I'll give you everything you need to start speaking with confidence. Remember, every confident Portuguese speaker started exactly where you are now, feeling nervous, making mistakes, and sometimes freezing up completely. But what separates those who succeed from those who stay stuck is they start speaking anyway. So use these questions this week, and yes, you might stumble, and yes, you might not understand every response, but you know what? You will survive, and more importantly, you will improve. More often than not, you will find that people are warm, they want to help you succeed, and they appreciate every effort that you are making to speak their language. So go ahead and take my free lesson, practice these questions, and let me know in the comments which one you're going to try first. And if you found this helpful, definitely subscribe because I share practical Portuguese tips like this every week. So I'll be back at the same time next week, and I hope to see you there. Ciao for now.